Well, welcome to another Friday night. Tonight I want to go into a question I get asked a lot, and it's really around healing. So first, is healing possible? How much work does it take? How long does it take? Will I ever be healed? Like just all kinds of healing type questions. And what I want to present tonight is a new term that has come out in the trauma field called post-traumatic growth, or PTG. Instead of PTSD, you can have PTG. And basically what it's wanting to help us understand is that healing is possible, but more than that. So if you look at this diagram, you have the traumatic event, huge amount of pain that's overwhelming. And so there's three kind of paths that can happen. So a child that doesn't have tools or support is going to go down the fight, flight, freeze, fawn path just to survive. And they're going to end up with PTSD or CPTSD. At some point, they can say, I want to heal. And so they're going to use tools and they're going to go down the healing path to heal the trauma. And what happens for many people with that path is they think they're just going to get back to where they were pre-trauma, to that untraumatized state. And many do that and they have decent lives. But what we're realizing is there's really a third path. So you can not just heal from the trauma, you can grow beyond the trauma. You can become better as a person, better in your skill set, better in what you're able to accomplish because of the trauma. And that's post-traumatic growth. So this talk is really designed to give hope, to lay out a model of what that looks like to reach that post-traumatic growth so that people can understand what this path to healing looks like, but can have some hope that this hard work does lead to some very good conclusions. Now, I just want to put in at the very beginning, before we get into this, the challenge with people with complex trauma or who have PTSD, CPTSD is they can be doing well in recovery. They can be on the second path to healing, the third path to post-traumatic growth, and then great amount of stress, great amount of pain through some event enters their life. And then they are forced really into kind of two paths. Number one is their brain's going to want to go back to that old survival path. This is too much. I can't handle it. It's too painful. Let's go back to fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And they just stay stuck there. They stop growing, they regress, and they kind of go back to this prison of being controlled by their trauma and all their trauma responses. Many start down that path because that's their brain's natural go-to place. But they realize, no, I don't have to go there. I can stop going back into old behaviors. I can jump back over to the healthy path and turn this into growth because I now have tools, I now have support so that this current stress and pain actually, instead of creating a trauma response, can create a growth response. And that is a challenge for everybody with complex trauma to begin to be able to do that, but it is possible. So I really hope this talk is a source of hope, a source of insight for you. I'm going to draw on the work of Dr. Edith Shiro and her book, The Unexpected Gift to Trauma, The Path to Post-Traumatic Growth. So she's been very involved in the research around what does post-traumatic growth look like? What is it? What are the steps to get there? And I just want to outline it. And then next week, I want to go into a wee bit more around the factors involved in producing post-traumatic growth. So let's start with this quote. Emotional trauma is the root cause of human suffering. It disguises itself as mental health disorders, destructive behaviors, chronic health issues. It can linger over time, remaining hidden from our conscious awareness for generations, or even be normalized by the culture or society in which we live. Trauma can be a reaction to something that recently happened or that happened years ago and yet shapes and informs the present. It is felt at the individual level as unprocessed emotions stored in our bodies. It is also felt within the familial, societal, political, and cultural climate in which the individual lives. So it's such a good summary of what we've come to understand over the years about trauma. Now let's go to post-traumatic growth. So people who are committed to growing beyond where they were before, or of transcending their trauma and moving into post-traumatic growth. They see trauma and adversity as possibilities for transformation, for wisdom and growth. They not only process what has happened to them and recover from it, but their lives are enriched because of the experience. These people more than survive. Each one emerges with a new understanding of life, a deeper connection to community, and more awareness of their divine purpose. Such an opportunity for rebirth often gives rise to a renewed commitment to be of service and to share the gift of their wisdom with others. Another quote. When a traumatic experience shatters our world and we're left to pick up the pieces, the idea that we can heal and actually transform as a result of the suffering can feel impossible. It's hard enough to put what happened behind us in order to deal with the day-to-day realities of life, let alone move on. But the fact is, by embracing adversity and working through the pain, we can derive meaning from our experience. We can grow from our traumas, and even more than that, we can completely transform. This is what post-traumatic growth is all about. So, as a psychological concept, post-traumatic growth was coined by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun at the University of North Carolina in the mid-90s. So through their research and clinical practice, they show that post-traumatic growth is a way of describing both the positive changes that people experience as a result of horrific events and the process they go to get there. So it's the new end result that they can have and what it takes to work through the trauma, heal, and get to even greater growth. So Tedeschi writes, a person may discover new capacities for relating to others, trusting themselves, appreciating life. These are capacities that weren't there before the traumatic experience, or they were present, but the person wasn't aware of them. Through the process of post-traumatic growth, the person begins to see the wisdom and the beauty hidden within their wounds as gifts that completely change the way they see the world and how they participate in it. So instead of seeing the wounds as something terrible that happened to me, which they are, something changes so you actually see, but I grew and something changed in me that was very positive. Something good can come out of this. The transformation people experience as a result of doing the work brings with it many gifts, a new meaning of life, a sense of internal peace, a deeper connection to others and to a higher power, a stronger sense of self. So post-traumatic growth is a way of finding purpose from the suffering and creating a life beyond the struggle trauma brings. So there's 5 stages that they've defined as part of this growth process. And they're kind of sequential, but it's not linear. They're up and down, back and forth. But you begin with stage 1, this stage of awareness or radical acceptance. So in this stage, you accept my life's a mess. So it's kind of like step 1 in the 12 steps program. My life's unmanageable. My life is falling apart. I can't fix it. I'm in pain. I don't have the tools to get myself straightened out. So a bunch of things that you accept. You accept what happened to you, your wounds from the past. So you're not minimizing them. You're not denying them. You're owning, this happened to me. I see it accurately. You accept where you're at today. My life's a mess. It's not where I want it to be or wish it to be. I don't know how to get there, but this is where I'm at. I'm not going to beat myself up for it. I didn't have the tools. I had all these wounds. I accept this is where I'm at. Then you acknowledge all of the challenges and facts about yourself and your situation. So you see your current situation accurately, your past accurately, and yourself accurately. These are my coping strategies. These are the patterns that have developed. They're not healthy. This is my situation. There's lots of unhealthiness there. You get really, really honest, and you just say, this is me. I accept this. I can't somehow make it magically into something that it's not. So you're accepting reality. That's bottom line where we start. And we've looked in other talks that this is hard because so much of complex trauma is denying reality because it's too painful to deal with. So to accept reality is accepting the painful emotions that come with facing reality. Then you realize what you can and cannot change. So this is beyond my control. This is what I can control. This is what I need to take responsibility for. Then you survey your situation, and this is so critical. Acceptance means you are surveying your situation without judgment or condemnation. You're not beating yourself up. You're accepting it without judgment or condemnation. Then you learn to be present in the present. So you're practicing mindfulness. So you're not going into your denial escapes, your dissociation, your fantasy lands. You're staying in the present. That is a key part of acceptance. Then you accept all the work that's going to be involved in the healing journey. And there's going to be a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of work you don't want to do. But you accept, okay, this is going to take a ton of work. This is going to be the hardest work I've ever done. I accept that. Then you accept how long the journey is going to take. There's no quick fix. It's not going to be done with a 15-week course with 1 year. This is going to be years of slowly working. I'm going to see progress all along. That's going to make it worth it. But there's going to be a slow process involved in this healing journey. I accept that. I'm not demanding a quick fix. Then you accept, I am going to now be facing all kinds of painful emotions. As I accept my situation, I'm not going to run from those emotions. I'm going to feel those emotions. And so, a quote, we can welcome our emotions for what they are. They're responses to life. They're a reaction to something that has touched us in some way. We can realize, for example, that we're really sad right now. We can put our sadness into a context and go, what's it connected to? Where does our sadness live in our body? Being emotionally connected gives us a way to understand that our sadness is attached to a certain experience or even an old memory. Now, somebody has said this, you can tell you're ready for radical acceptance when. So let me quickly read this. Your coping mechanisms have stopped working. Your defense mechanisms and behavior bring more pain and suffering than they bring joy. You're paralyzed and stuck in life. Your emotions easily overwhelm you. You can no longer stand the intensity of your anxiety. You experience unexplained physical pain and emotional distress. You are fed up with being fed up. You admit that your relationships are a disaster. You're tired of all the drama. You don't want to live in fear or loneliness anymore. You have no name for what you are experiencing. You feel hopeless and helpless and cut off from others. And you realize that you have childhood story of trauma. So all of those are true to you. You are at the point where you're ready to start this journey. You're ready to say, okay, I'm a mess. I can't fix it myself. I need help. I need to start this journey. That's stage one. For many, that's a very hard stage. But once you start it, then you go to stage two, the stage of awakening, safety, and protection. And we've said over and over again, you can't heal trauma and get healthy unless you're in a safe environment with safe people. So you now have to seek out help and support in the form of a person or people who are safe, that you can trust. You have to have a safe space to go to that's both physical and environment. And so this stage is about moving and removing. moving towards safety, removing what keeps us unsafe, what triggers us. This can mean reaching out to people who basically give you the strength to tell your story and respond with, we believe you, we don't judge you, we love you, we appreciate you, and we want to help you. That's what we're talking about. This is such a key step. You can't heal without it. But there's another piece to this step, and that is this. Part of healing is becoming authentic, becoming vulnerable, talking about the wounds, talking about the painful stuff, talking about deep fears. That requires even greater safety because you're talking about the stuff you used to get punished for. You're talking about the stuff you used to get laughed at. And so now to heal, to go to those places is going to create fear that something bad's going to happen. You're going to get judged or punished or laughed at. So you need safe people, safe places in order to be totally honest. There's another piece that's so important to see with this. Healing requires safe people, and that's accented by the fact that it requires becoming vulnerable. A lot of cultures and family systems have always presented vulnerability as weakness. Oh, you're just a little crybaby. Be tough. You don't talk about those things. And that's presented as strength. And so what you're really doing in this step is breaking through some of the old family cultural lies that present the very necessary steps for healing vulnerability as weakness. And you're reframing it and say that's actually strength. It takes tremendous courage and strength to open up about these very painful things. Brene Brown, who's done so much wonderful work about this, says this about vulnerability. It's an excruciating act of allowing ourselves to be seen. The thing about vulnerability is that we don't really know how others will react to what we've just told them or what we're about to share. And yet we do it anyway. Vulnerability is the path we must take to find our way back to each other and to ourselves. It's a commitment to radical honesty, which is really the only way we can connect. And true connection is the key ingredient to healing our pain. So we start with radical acceptance. Then to heal, we need radical honesty, which means we need safety. Safe people, safe communities, safe places. The third step then is the stage of becoming or creating new narrative, learning healthy tools, learning what a healthy life looks like, gradually practicing those tools, getting beyond all of the masks that I wore so I don't even know who I am, figuring out who I am, learning my personality, learning my skills, my passions, my desires, learning what I'm good at. All of those become part of this stage. Now you can see there's a lot to learn here. This is a lengthy stage. But what is so important to realize is there's a couple components here that are key. This stage invites curiosity. This stage invites, who am I? What does healthy look like? What do I want to do with the rest of my life? What am I good at? I can begin to explore. I can begin to not let trauma write my survival story, but I realize I can create a new story of who I am and what I want to become based on actually who I am, not on surviving. And that is so wonderful. So again, Brene Brown says, our job is not to deny the story that we had, the trauma story. Our job is to defy the ending of that story. It's not a fated story that I'm just going to turn out to be this person who's in survival mode. No, I can now rise strong. I can recognize our story and rumble with the truth until we get to the place where we think, yes, this is what happened, but I choose how the story ends. The next stage is the stage of being or integration. So what I'm doing now is taking all of the stuff that happened in my trauma with the previous stage, all that I'm learning about myself and what it means to be healthy and all these new tools for coping, and I'm integrating the two. All of those years of trauma and what I did to survive, I'm not just discarding that and say that was all bad. There was a lot of skills I learned in there. There were a lot of tools I learned in there. It shaped me in certain ways. I still want to value that, but I want to now integrate it with this new me. So this is the stage of being both and. We're still acknowledging the past. We've healed from the past, but it did teach us a lot, shape us a lot, but we've learned a whole bunch of new stuff, and we're bringing them together. This is such an important thing. So Dr. van der Kolk says, when you are able to integrate the old trauma with the new, you no longer see the trauma as if it's happening in the present moment. You can actually talk about the trauma in the past. So the trauma, it's a memory now. It happened. I've learned from it. It did influence me, but it doesn't control me now. So the mantra becomes, I am who I am because of my trauma, not in spite of it. And then the final stage, the stage of transforming, or wisdom and growth. So now what's becoming clearer and clearer as you've healed, as you now figured out this new life, who you are, this new skill set, what healthy life is. Now you develop this new sense of purpose because you've integrated with your trauma, and your trauma now gives you this sense of, I want to help other people in this area. So you now have a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. You now want to get back out and take all that you've learned and pass it on to others in your community and help them so that they can deal with their trauma. So let me make a couple comments. This model then describes the process of healing, but what you can see is there's a psychodynamic psychology as you deal with stuff. There's neurobiology. There's epigenetics. It's holistic. It's a mind, body, spirit approach that centers both on the individual and the community. So it's formed by relational and systemic stuff. It's intergenerational, it's cultural. And that's what we've tried to emphasize over the years, is that healing trauma has so many different factors. It is bio, psychosocial, spiritual. You got to bring all of that together to get it. And that's what this model is saying. Beyond that, each one of these 5 stages addresses trauma, recovery, and growth through 3 interlocking lenses. So you got to have a relationship with yourself, you got to have a relationship with others, and you got to have a relationship to the world. All 3 of those connections become important. So you got to have a relationship to yourself. That's healing. That's getting to know yourself, knowing who you are, your identity. That's knowing kind of the strength you have inside of you. That's developing a relationship with yourself, learning to accept and love the whole of you, doing internal family systems, inner child work. That is seeing where I'm vulnerable, being honest about that, and developing who I really am. But then I have to have connection with others. I got to have safe people that I am building relationships with. You can't heal trauma on your own. You do need connection. And then I need a relationship with the world. I need to be able to know when to engage with the world, when to withdraw from the world, when the world's lying to me, when the world is safe, when the world is not safe. And so we sometimes call all of these things having agency. It's giving ourselves the sense that we can control elements of our environment. We can set boundaries. We can make our world less chaotic, more manageable, more safe, more healthy. We can go from a complex trauma world where there were no possibilities to creating a world where there are many possibilities, where we have tremendous influence in that. The other thing that's so important to see is that there's no straight line in this growth, and we mentioned that. This is dealing with people who are coming from different severities of trauma, different tools, different rate at building support groups, at building connection, and it's an up and down journey. So what's happened though, and why we have these models, is in working with thousands of people, you begin to see patterns in healing. You begin to see you got to get this in place before you can go to this, before you can go to this. This is kind of how it generally flows. So it's not saying this is going to be a nice black and white, neat and tidy, linear model, but it's saying this is what it's going to look like in general as you go on your healing journey. Now, let me just quickly add this whole post-traumatic growth. There's been people that have worked on it and developed similar models that are just slightly different. And I just quickly want to highlight them. So this Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, who started this whole post-traumatic growth concept, they used a 5-step process. So they said you learn from the trauma. So that's you heal, you manage the distress, you got to learn to regulate the emotions when it gets triggered, and we talk about that all the time. You disclose the trauma, you got to begin to be able to put words to it and talk about it and reprocess it. You create a narrative, you begin to understand this is what healthy looks like, this is who I am, this is, I can recreate my life, and then you find a mission. So again, we've said all of those things before, it's just a different way of saying it. Judith Herman, and we've talked about her before, the author of Trauma and Recovery. So she uses a 4-step path to recovery, and it's really focusing on individual empowerment. So she says you got to create a safe container. So you got to start with safety. Then you deal with the trauma, you mourn the old self, you mourn all that is lost because of the trauma. So there's a real grieving, dealing with the trauma healing stage. Then you go to 3, you create a new identity. You develop rebuilding your life. And then you reestablish community. You build connection. And you get involved in the community. So again, it's saying the same things, just a little bit differently. And then Stephen Joseph, who's written a book, What Doesn't Kill Us, he outlines 6 signposts that can facilitate post-traumatic growth. So you take stock of the situation. So that's radical acceptance, being honest. You harvest hope. Looks overwhelming. It looks like it's going to be too hard, but others have done it and been successful, so that's going to give me a bit of hope. Then you reauthor. And then you identify change, where I need to change, where I need to create safety, boundaries I need to set, things I need to do differently, old patterns I need to change. That's a huge piece of learning. Then you got to value that change and say, I want to do that more than I want to continue in the old patterns. And then you put change into action. Psychologist Ralph De La Rosa, author of Don't Tell Me to Relax, he gives this honest, heartfelt assessment of this process. So let me read it to you because I think it's just excellent. I thought the point was to heal my trauma. That was eating at me after all. And it did heal. It was the hardest work I've ever done. It felt like it would go on forever, but it didn't. And while I was doing the work of healing, something else entirely was happening. I was becoming who I was meant to be all along. Going into my wounding at one time felt like some burden I had to bear because life had been so cruel to me. But it turned into the deepest spiritual work I could have ever engaged in. And not some path that someone taught me per se, not some religious fantasy handed down from authority. Honest, genuine, spontaneous, creative, spiritual presence came alive. I am eternally grateful to all the wounds, to all the people who hurt me and dismissed me. They gave me the material that alchemized into something truly beautiful. So as he was doing the work of healing, something else began to happen. He began to transform into something he didn't even think was possible. Peter Levine, an authority around trauma recovery, says this: trauma has the power to destroy, but it's also got the power to transform. Within the seeds of darkness and despair lives the potential for life to bloom into the light. And then Richard Tedeschi again says, remember, it's the struggle with distress that leads to growth, not the traumatic event itself. So it's how we choose to respond to the distress that comes out of trauma that will decide whether we grow or not. So let me end with, what are the 5 pillars? And that's basically, okay, if I do these 5 stages and do all of this hard work over the course of years, and like Tedeschi said, the hardest work he's ever done, what can I expect? And they've identified 5 results that are going to come out of this that are going to make it worthwhile. An appreciation for life, a greater personal strength, greater meaningful relationships, deeper spiritual connection, and a purpose and meaning in life like you've never had before. Now, before I expand on these, I would just say these are so true. I have seen this in thousands of people. And to see the joy when they start experiencing these 5 pillars in their life makes all the work worthwhile. It is just beautiful to watch. And I've gone through it in my own life. And so trauma and the hard work of healing and growing at times feels overwhelming. It feels like, is this even worth it? But when you start coming out the other side and you experience these 5 pillars, you go, I am so glad I did the work. This is way better than anything I have ever known. So number 1, there is a deeper appreciation of life. After everything that you go through, it's just like there's a fresh outlook on life. It's like you want to enjoy life even more. You don't want to miss out on anything. You have a greater appreciation for what it means to be alive. You have a greater appreciation, gratitude for what you experience in life, the relationships you have, the skills that you have, the peace that you have. You're awakened at a deeper level. There's a deeper awareness. You're more aware of your surroundings externally. You're more aware of what's going on inside of you and the growth that is happening. You're more awareness of skills and tools to handle situations, which enables you to enjoy life more because you're responding better. And so you're able to savor those moments, and you're not distracted constantly by the chaotic mind of what do I do? What do I do? That leads to a greater peace, a greater gratitude for everything. So you're gratitude for what you're experiencing today, but you're also grateful for the trauma you went through because it's been part of the package that got you to where you are today. You hate the terrible stuff that happened to you, but you're thankful in a way that it did because of what you've learned from it. That's what comes out of this. So what you can see is happening there is the second pillar is you've grown stronger. So let me read you Tedeschi in Transformed by Trauma. He says this: when something has been ripped away, people who experience post-traumatic growth recognize what has been hidden from them can be seen again. The sleeping giant lying dormant inside can be awakened, and a new perspective and approach to life can unfold. Incredible strength and resolve can come to light, and the person changes the life course. So when a child is in trauma, they go into survival mode. They use tools to survive. That means there's a part of them, a skill set, a personality, all kinds of potential that is hidden, that they're not even aware of because they're in survival mode. They don't even have a chance to explore it. They don't even have a chance to be aware of it. But now in post-traumatic growth, you become aware of this sleeping giant. You become aware of these strengths and abilities and potential that you didn't even know you had, and you begin to nurture them and develop them. And a strength develops beyond just the strength of coming back from the trauma, but a person with more ability, a person with greater potential than you ever realized before. But again, let me emphasize this stage of personal strength. What you realize that is also includes being more vulnerable. It is not strength based on suppressing vulnerability and not showing vulnerability and just acting strong all the time. No, it is genuine strength. That is my full potential, my full personality, fully human, fully showing all my emotions, vulnerable. That is the strength we are talking about. And then the third benefit is meaningful relationships. Relationships that are more nurturing, more meaningful, more satisfying, have deeper intimacy, that are safe, that are enjoyable, that are meeting needs, that aren't constant conflict, constant hurt, constant neglect, constant anger. That is what has happened. So we deepen them because we're more present, we're more kind, we're more compassionate. We prioritize connection over getting rich, over getting things. We're emotionally more involved and intimate in the relationships and present. And so that creates synergies that bring us together, and your strength complements my strengths, and we're better together than apart. We accomplish more together than apart. And so relationships just have multiple benefits that begin to come out of the growth in us and the deepening of connections in relationship. So relationships are meaningful, but they become co-creative. They become marked more by genuine love than by constant dancing because of shame. And there's a trust and a comfort that is there. So Esther Perel has said this: the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our life. It's not how many books you have in your library, how many awards you receive for the work you do, where you live, or how smart you are. It's the attention you pay to the relationships you have. Not just with your families, studies suggest, but the long-lasting friendships you nurture. People who have authentic, loving relationships have a higher probability of living longer and being happier. The fourth pillar is a deeper spiritual connection. Now, this has nothing to do with institutional religion. In fact, spirituality and religion are very distinct concepts. Spirituality is not a scripted set of beliefs that comes from an outside source. It's an overwhelming sense of union or connection with everything, with yourself, with others, with nature, with the world. It's a feeling that we belong to something bigger than ourselves. And embracing such deep interconnection, we begin to act in ways that unite people instead of divide people. Lisa Miller defines spirituality as a moment of deep connection with another being or in nature, a feeling of awe or transcendence, an experience of startling synchronicity, feeling held or inspired by something greater than yourself. And then the final pillar is purpose and meaning. So we become more aware of our purpose in the world, that we have a responsibility to create more conscious connection, to use our gift to benefit to others, to make the world a more compassionate, more inclusive place. We realize we can no longer stay small. We have a higher purpose than just meeting our own needs. Our mission in the world becomes clear, and often the pain that we healed from fuels that purpose. It often becomes our superpower. So that's post-traumatic growth. Next week, I'm going to develop it a little bit further, but I hope it gives you a sense that, hey, I can heal, but I can even do more than heal. Yes, it takes hard work, but it is worth it. Thank you so much for being with us again.